Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Changing the Conversation on Privacy. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Trina Hiscock, and I'm the Chief Marketing and Implementation Officer at Innovate Cities, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that our webinar is hosted today on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today's discussion, we will provide an overview of Innovate Cities' newly launched data trust, CityShield. We'll talk about private AI and Replica analytics, privacy-enhancing technologies, and we'll also hear about the importance of data privacy and governance, two foundational pillars of CityShield. You'll hear from our four speakers, and we'll open the last 10 minutes for Q&A. We encourage you to type your question in the Q&A box on your screen, and I'll do my best to get to as many as I can in the time allotted. I am joined today by four Canadian thought leaders on the topics of privacy, technology, and governance. Let me introduce them. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Cavoukian, the world's leading expert on privacy, Innovate Cities Chief Privacy Officer, and the founder of CEO of Global Privacy and Security by Design. We are also honored to have Patricia Thaine, CEO of Private AI, and Khaled Emam, SVP and General Manager of Replica Analytics, and of course, our very own Executive Director of Innovate Cities, Hugh O'Reilly. So let's begin and kick things off. Today, Hugh, why don't we start with you? There's so much we want to know, and our attendees want to know about Innovate Cities and why you chose to build a data trust, and why is it uniquely different than any other data trust in the world? Over to you.
Thank you, Trina, and welcome everyone. Really really appreciate having the opportunity to speak to all of you today. What I want to touch on in my 10 minutes is to, first of all, introduce Innovate Cities. I want to speak to CityShield, our data trust, how it operates, and I also want to speak to our commitment to privacy, which is always in the news and was in the news over the last 24 hours with respect to both the Green Party and Home Depot. And when I speak, I will talk about how we have approached the issues and how we are demonstrating our commitment to privacy in the context of data sharing. I want to begin by describing Innovate Cities. Innovate Cities is an organization that was founded by scale-up innovation companies with a focus on bringing the products of Canadian innovators to the urban environment and also to bringing them to market. And as we go through today, and as you hear our speakers, I think it's really important to note that these are world-leading companies and these are Canadian innovators. CityShield itself is founded upon the technology that was developed by Sightline Innovations, a Canadian innovation company. Private AI is a Canadian innovation company, and Replica Analytics, its concepts were developed in Canada, and it is a Canadian company. As I noted, we're funded by FedDev Ontario. So let me just talk a little bit about what a data trust is, how our data trust operates, and then I want to speak to the issues of how it is we've decided to deal with the importance of privacy and in protecting the personal identifiable information of individuals. So first of all, our data trust is unique and it's unlike any other data trust that operates in the world. And if you're interested, we actually have a report that bears that point out. It's on our website. So first and foremost, what our data trust is a data sharing platform. But the way it operates is if an organization decides that they want to store their data with us, we can do that. We can do that through another Canadian partner we have, which is ThinkOn, which is our cloud provider. But the way the technology operates, there is no need to store your data with us. Rather, the way our technology operates is our system developed by Sightlines needs access to the system of data providers, and data providers, under the way our data trust operates, control who gets to see and use their data. So fundamentally, what CityShield is a data sharing platform. Data sharing platforms are critical in terms of the innovation economy. They're critical to improving the way services are provided to citizens, residents, and people who visit our urban centers. And it has the potential, when we look at sharing data and analyzing it and understanding it, to make lives better, to move innovation forward, and to create the kind of society based on innovation that the Canadian government wants and all Canadian citizens want. But as the recent examples with Home Depot and the Green Party bear out, while data sharing might be thought to be a good thing, it's very important to ensure that data is shared in a way that protects the personally identifiable information of individuals and protects their right to privacy. With that in mind, Innovate Cities has adopted a series of protections to ensure that personally identifiable information is not transmitted into our data sharing platform. I'm going to focus primarily in the next few minutes on the governance approach we've taken, but I also will touch a little bit on the technological solutions we've come up with, and of course, both Patricia and Khaled will speak to those technological solutions in more detail. So first of all, from a governance point of view, we are going to comply with GDPR, which is the European privacy standard, which is the gold standard. And the reason why we've chosen that is Canada has a number of different standards. We thought the simplest solution was to go to the best standard first. That way we can ensure we can comply with Canadian privacy rules. Second thing we've done from a governance point of view is we've appointed Cavoukian as our Chief Privacy Officer. And well, she operates this way regardless of what a contract would say, but in this case, the contract actually says it. She's completely independent. If there are concerns or complaints that are raised, she has the power to investigate them, and she will also have the power to ensure that any problems are dealt with. I will also add, I hope Anne says this at the end, we involve Anne in everything we do from the beginning. We don't get her involved at the end. We don't put her in an awkward spot. And when we think about privacy by design, it is our actual reality. The next thing is we have established an advisory board for CityShield. When we look at the experience of Sidewalk Labs, and I don't think anyone celebrated the end of Sidewalk Labs, but having said that, there are a lot of lessons to be learned. So we established an advisory board to ensure that community concerns can be addressed. Our advisory board is diverse in terms of its makeup. It also includes expertise with people who have privacy expertise, technology expertise, and also can reflect community concerns. This is important. The next thing to add, which is a differentiating feature, is we are a not-for-profit. We are not in the business of selling personally identifiable information to advertisers or others. We're in the business of promoting Canadian innovators. And because we're a not-for-profit, we can act as an honest broker between organizations that provide data and organizations that use data, and organizations that provide the data can have the certainty that they can outsource their privacy compliance and their governance compliance to us, and that we will respect the privacy of individuals. You will hear from Patricia and from Khaled how we approach the different kinds of data sets. Because even in a circumstance when an organization provides us with a data set that states that it has no PII in it, we will confirm this using the private AI data. Data sets that do have personally identifiable information, we will apply the Replica analytics software, which provides a level of synthetic protection, and Khaled will speak to that in some detail. So Trina, I think I'm within my 10 minutes, and I'm looking forward. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. I think that it's that we're doing this during the Privacy Week, and that we have an opportunity to share what we're doing and to learn from the audience. We're looking forward to this. So with that, Trina, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Hugh. It's really been an incredible experience for me to work alongside you and the Innovate Cities team on CityShield, and I can attest to its uniqueness as well, and it's been great to work with everyone involved from Private AI, Replica Analytics, and of course, Anne. So without further ado, let's move on to Patricia, and Patricia is going to speak to us about Private AI, what Private AI models do, what is it that they can take care of, and why it's important that we made sure that Private AI's technology was built in to CityShield and what it means to further enhance our commitment to privacy. Patricia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Trina. First of all, I want to say that it's a real honor to be working with a group of such incredible individuals with such high ethical standards. Really glad to be here. So essentially, Private AI was born on the remarking that even the most basics of privacy in 2019 weren't being done well when it came to unstructured data. Unstructured data are things like free-form text, images, video, audio, and so on. And the most basic aspect is you need to be able to recognize the personally identifiable information, if there is any, within the data. And that allows you to determine what kind of risk there are. That allows you to remove the risks if they are located in the data. It allows you to control the data flow appropriately. And essentially what organizations are doing are sitting on tons of data and oftentimes have no idea what is in there. And what I love about what you're doing at Innovate Cities is you're doing it from the very beginning. You're doing it right. You're making sure that the privacy is integrated in a way that it won't come back to bite you later on. Now, there are different kinds of data types. There's the unstructured data types that I mentioned. There's also structured data like databases, which is what Innovate Cities often deals with. And then semi-structured, which is a mix of structured and it could be, for example, doctor's notes in a column of the database, or it can be somebody giving some sort of customer feedback in a column of the database. And those are the kinds of information that can contain a lot of surprising data. But when it comes to structured data itself, accidents happen. So people might accidentally put in a credit card number where a name should be. And so when you drop the credit card number column, you might be in trouble because there's still a credit card number in another column that you didn't expect. And what we're here for is to verify whether when data is being processed to be de-identified, that there isn't anything that was actually missed in that database itself. When it comes to the kinds of data that we normally work with, it can be anything from unstructured all the way to structured data because we use really powerful AI models. And these AI models are trained on a huge amount of data from anywhere from logs, for example, if you can imagine logs from the output of a program, and it might tell you the date and time an error occurred, and it might accidentally spew out a credit card number in there or the kind of data that it failed on. And we also work with contact center information. We work with healthcare data like electronic medical records or doctor's notes. We work with insurance companies, in order to be very much like at Innovate Cities, a firewall for the personally identifiable information when it's going from one environment to another. And that is what is really necessary to prevent access to the personally identifiable information while maximizing the amount of data that an individual can see. And that is super important. So the kinds of technologies that Replica Analytics works on and the kinds of technologies that Private AI works on is the type of privacy enhancing technology that allows you to see data so that you can analyze it, so that you can then be able to capture a kind of value that you might otherwise not be able to if you weren't able to tangibly do things with that data. So there are great other privacy enhancing technologies out there. You may have heard of homomorphic encryption, for example. You may have heard of secure multi-party computation. These are wonderful when you already understand the data, already know what you're going to do with the data. But oftentimes developers or people who are using the data for various purposes need to be able to view the data in order to determine what kind of things they can even do with it. And that is where we step in. And one thing that we really focus on as well in this process is looking at what the data protection regulations require and doing so around the world. So we're not only just looking at English data, we're doing this across 47 different languages. We're doing this looking at what the GDPR requires in terms of personally identifiable information. We're doing this for direct identifiers as well as indirect identifiers, direct identifiers being entire names, entire addresses, social security numbers, and indirect identifiers are more things that, when combined together, can re-identify an individual, like their religion or their sexual orientation, their approximate location. And these are all very important to look at because when you don't, you end up with re-identification attacks. And that has often happened when people have not understood what it is that they are collecting and just removing direct identifiers and ignoring the indirect identifiers. So in these data protection regulations like the GDPR, like the Quebec Privacy Act, like the CPRA in California, they all list the types of personal data that they consider personally identifiable information, and there's always, of course, more to it than what they list. And those are things that we're constantly keeping track of and constantly adding more types of data, more entity types, and more languages in order to address for not just an English-speaking population, but a worldwide audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patricia. A lot to digest there, and I encourage our attendees in today's webinar to reach out to Patricia as well if you have any further questions. We'll also take some questions in a little bit. And I know, Patricia, I was happy to read your 2023 predictions on progress in privacy thinking that you was posted earlier this month, and so I encourage our listeners and viewers to also check that out. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Khaled Emam to give us an overview of Replica Analytics and its privacy enhancing technology. Khaled is joining us all the way from Dubai today, and we're so grateful that he can be here with us. Khaled, over to you.
And thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. So I'll start off by giving you an overview of what Replica Analytics is and what Replica Analytics does, and the types of technology or solutions that we bring to the table. So we're an Ottawa-based company that's developing a type of privacy enhancing technology called synthetic data generation. While the company is relatively young, the team's experience spans multiple decades developing and deploying privacy-enhancing technologies globally. Replica Analytics is a technology company. We develop software as well as a methodology to enable the responsible data reuse and data sharing. Let me describe what synthetic data is and what synthetic data generation is so that I can give you more details on how it can be used. So synthetic data is produced by a type of AI model called the generative model, and you have probably seen generative models in operation through generated paintings and generated faces of people, so-called deep fakes. So these types of images are produced from these generative models, and the same kind of technology can be used to generate synthetic data. And the way it works is you start off with a real data set of some sort. So this would be structured data, as Patricia mentioned, data that would typically be stored in a database. And then you train an AI model, this generative model, on the data. And the generative model learns the patterns in this data. And then you generate new data from the model. So the new data that you produce or that you generate, which is the synthetic data, doesn't have a one-to-one mapping to the original data. And this is where the privacy characteristics come in, because there isn't, or there shouldn't be, a one-to-one mapping between the generated data and the real data, because the generated data is produced from this model that's been trained. So the quality of the generated data is really a function of how good that AI model is. But as you probably have seen from the examples I mentioned with images, these types of generative models have become quite good at learning patterns in data. In the case of images, that become so good that recent studies have shown that people can't tell the difference between fake images and real images, and they trust the images of fake people more than they trust the images of real people. So it's interesting in what it says about the technology, but also it's a little bit scary about what it says about the technology. In any case, so we can, the technology works quite well in maintaining the patterns and generating realistic data. And it has some properties that enable it to be protective of individual privacy. So it's a modern way to have data that is not identifiable. And as with all privacy enhancing technologies, there's a privacy and utility trade-off. So the more that the data is protective of privacy, there is also at the same time a utility hit, in the sense that the utility of the data is reduced. So one of the advantages of synthetic data is that it provides a better privacy utility trade-off than other privacy enhancing technologies, in the sense that it can maintain low disclosure risks and also maintain high data utility. And most of the uses of synthetic data are in analytics. So building machine learning models, performing statistical analysis, perform descriptive analysis, tabulations, dashboards, etc. So you want that data to be as realistic as possible and to give you the same types of conclusions as the original data. And synthetic data is able to achieve that type of trade-off in a good way. So as part of what Replica Analytics has done is that we have developed metrics to quantify the privacy risk so that the process is repeatable and can be scaled to large and complex data sets. And part of our strategy from the outset has been transparency, and therefore our metrics and their validation have been published and reviewed by our peers, so you can find a lot of information online and links from our website. So we've been quite open about the approach and about the technology, how it works, and the empirical validations that we have performed ourselves and with our clients. There are also many different types of or degrees of synthesis that can be applied depending on the sensitivity of the data, for example, which allows us to make data available for secondary purposes while still being able to make credible claims about the privacy risks and maintaining the quality of the data. So it's not a single approach. It's a toolbox that can be applied, and you choose the appropriate tool for the type of data and the types of uses you want to put this data towards. But also I'd like to emphasize that, we're talking here about protecting privacy and ensuring disclosure risks are small, but we're not talking about zero risk. So there's always some risk, and the objective is to ensure that this risk is very small, and synthetic data generation is a good approach to ensure that this risk is very small. But I think it's not, the standard of zero risk is not a standard that can be met by any privacy enhancing technology. So synthetic data generation technology or approaches have been applied to different types of data, ranging from tabular to longitudinal data in multiple domains, such as healthcare and retail, and for small data sets, for example, about rare diseases, to data sets that cover tens of millions of lives. So therefore, in that sense, it's scalable up and scalable down. And you don't require, it's not required to make strong assumptions about how the data, synthetic data, will be used, or the types of analytics that will be applied. A priori, the synthetic data generated will typically work quite well across a multitude of different workloads or data analysis scenarios. In the context of Innovate Cities, I think that what we have here is really a very powerful combination, because this allows the sharing of multimodal data. So this is structured data, as I said, that comes out of a database, as well as unstructured data and text together, and having both of those types of data to be made available in a responsible manner. Historically, or it's more common to be able to share one type of data, but being able to share multiple types of data sets and ensure the consistency and ensure that the privacy risks are managed concurrently provides a very powerful capability that can enable, can help solve more complex societal problems, and can also make data sets, useful data sets, available to a larger community of analysts that can help us solve the many problems that we are facing today as a community, from healthcare problems to environmental problems to the many other types of problems we're facing today. So with that, I'll stop, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Khaled, so much for that. And I know there are some questions coming in already, which I'm not surprised by, and we'll get to those shortly in the Q&A session. But right now, I'd like to turn it over to, of course, last but certainly not least, Dr. Anne Cavoukian, and she's going to speak on today's topic. Privacy is in Anne's DNA, and there's a reason why we have her as our Chief Privacy Officer. We take, as Hugh said, we take Anne's guidance very seriously, and she's so strongly committed to supporting, promoting, and showcasing Canadian innovation, and especially as it relates to privacy. So I know she has lots to say on the to kind of comment on the first three speakers that you just heard from. So Anne, over to you.
Thank you very much, Trina. It's such a pleasure to be here to speak today. And you have to understand, things have evolved so much in the most wonderful way. When Hugh first approached me quite a while back to become the Chief Privacy Officer at Innovate Cities, I said, I'm happy to do it, but you better prepare yourself. I don't keep quiet about very much. He said, that's what we want. We'll see if he still wants that, but it was very kind. So, but what struck me was that Innovate Cities and CityShield have a deep commitment to privacy. They walk their talk, or there's no way they would come and approach me. So I was delighted with that, and the work that I've done with Hugh has been very positive, moving things forward. You see, that's always my goal. I've always hated the zero-sum mindset of privacy versus security, or privacy versus data utility. That is so yesterday, and it's ridiculous. So I want to tell people, get rid of zero sum. It's not one interest versus another. You have to have multiple interests at the same time. And of course, privacy must be strongly protected, but you can't forfeit data utility for strong privacy. No one will do it, and it won't work. And that's the beauty of what we've heard from private AI, Patricia Thaine, and Khaled Emam's Replica Analytics. Both of these companies and the way they apply privacy protective methods is just to be applauded. I've worked with both of them. I had the pleasure of doing that, and it makes me just so happy that people are walking the talk. So Patricia has incorporated very strong privacy measures and private AI. I mean, artificial intelligence is growing dramatically, as you know. And what always concerns me is people think there's some kind of magic to AI. Well, it's just out there, it's doing its thing. We don't know what, we're not going to mess with it. You have to mess with it. You have to look under the hood. You have to know what the technology, what is the AI doing? And it's so critical to have that mindset that privacy must be strongly protected, regardless of the enormous benefits that may be accrued from artificial intelligence, which are enormous, there's no question. So I applaud Patricia's approach to this, and I know it will continue to strongly protect privacy, but to deliver AI results. And Khaled's synthetic data is just, it's earth-shaking to me. It's marvelous because it doesn't just leave the data the way it is and strip off a few personal identifiers and hope it doesn't get reconnected. No, it's a completely different platform. It's developed metrics, and there's transparency on the synthetic data. So you know how the original data set has been replicated, if you will, in a synthetic manner that protects all the personal information, the personal identifiers. So you still have valuable data that you can use, and that's essential. But you have very strong privacy. And I applaud Khaled in saying, let's be clear, there's no such thing as zero risk. There's always some kind of potential risk. I mean, that's life. You go for a walk, you cross the street, something might happen. The point is, synthetic data goes to great lengths to strongly protect the data. And it's not the original data you're dealing with. It goes to great lengths to synthesize the data, if you will, and protect it very, very strongly. So I encourage lots of companies come to me. I point them to Khaled for synthetic data, and if they're contemplating AI, to Patricia, because we have to have these very strong measures in the future of our Innovate Cities. Innovation is happening everywhere. It's not going to go away. So it's not like we're going to return to a time in the past and get rid of all this new technology. Of course not. It's going to keep advancing. So we have to make sure that we've embedded the much needed privacy protective measures into the design of these technologies. And I'm just going to take a moment to talk about privacy by design, something I created many years ago when I was privacy commissioner here in Ontario. But we've had such luck with this. And when it was included in the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU, which came into effect in 2018, this was huge because all of a sudden the whole world was saying, oh, privacy by design, and privacy as the default, which is the second of 7 foundational principles of privacy by design. So them including it in that was so huge, and it went global. I mean, I hear from people all the time. I get media interview requests all the time and speaking engagements, and I love it because it spreads the word and it tells the public and both private sector and public sector entities, yes, you can have very strong data utility and privacy. You can have strong security and privacy. You can do both. It's not an either-or dated zero-sum model. Get rid of that. That is like so yesterday. And that's what I'm encouraging people to think about. And I also have to point out, two things. So first of all, January 28th is Privacy Day, and this is Privacy Week. I remember, when I was privacy commissioners, when we were trying to come up with the date years ago, let's create Privacy Day. And January 28th, like it depended on where you were in the world. People here over here wanted it in the summer, and people in Australia, at different times. So anyway, somehow we settled on January 28th, and I'll never forget that because it was earth-shaking to come up with a day that was going to be considered the day for privacy. Privacy forms the foundation of our freedom. You cannot have free and open societies without a solid foundation of privacy. And I like to remind people of that. And privacy hinges on control, personal control relating to the use and disclosure of one's personal information. It's critical. And I emphasize this again and again. And one thing I'm very excited to announce is that on February the 8th, just next week, Privacy by Design, which I literally created at my kitchen table many years ago over 3 nights, is now going to become an ISO standard. It's going to be ISO 31700, and this is huge. It's going to be released in the UK, but we're holding a webinar for it on February the 8th, and people from all around the world have signed up. I'm talking 10,000 people have signed up already. In fact, we had several times we had to push back. It was, you know, telling people about it, people would sign up and it would say, no, it's sold out. And then I would contact the people in the UK and say, please open it up some more. So they would. We did that 3 times, it was sold out, and then we opened it up because so much interest. We have to be so excited about this. And I have to applaud my colleague, Michelle Chiba, who I've worked with for so many years. She was instrumental on getting the ISO 31700 privacy by design passed. She's been working with the ISO team for the last couple of years. We've worked so hard on this. It takes a long time for an international standards organization like ISO to consider introducing another ISO standard, but they're doing it. And that's why I'm so excited by this and so many other features. What I want to say to people is, don't look at the odds. You know, I tweet every day. I like to tweet the biggest stories of the day every morning. My husband is a saint. So first thing in the morning, 5, 6 o'clock, I tweet out the stories of the day. And invariably, and I have a large Twitter following, but invariably 1 or 2 people will email back and say, look, lady, that ship has sailed. Privacy is dead. I say, get another friggin' ship. You don't give up on freedom just because it's harder. You don't give up on something because it's more difficult to attain. You work harder to attain it. It's critical. You know, and I learned this from my parents. I mean, my parents barely survived the Armenian genocide, 1915. 1.5 million Armenians were killed. They were scheduled to be killed the next morning. They were in the prison, and my grandfather's thinking, what can I do to save my family? My father was 3 years old at the time with them. And what does my grandfather do? He was an artist, a brilliant painter artist, but so what, right? No, wrong. He had seen General Pasha earlier in the day, and from memory, my grandmother told me that she used to carry around parchment paper and charcoal because my granddad loved to etch. From memory, he etched a portrait of General Pasha, and in the morning, he rolled it up. The soldiers were taking him out to be killed. He gives it to the soldier and says, please give this to General Pasha with my regards. And the soldier says, stupid man, what's he going to want to do this? Forget about it. So my grandparents thought that was it. They were saying their prayers. They thought they were going to be killed. Just before they're about to be killed, General Pasha comes on horseback waving the parchment papers. And who did this? I want to know who did this. And my grandfather says, Efendi, that's sir in Turkish, I did it. He said, I like it very much. You and your family, you're free to go. That's how, I mean, what were the odds? The odds were remote. I wouldn't be here talking to you today if they didn't defy the odds. So I want you to defy the odds. Look at the kinds of technology that private AI and Replica analytics are offering us. We have so much we can do. It's just going to continue to get better. Never give up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. Anne, I swear you made me want to jump up and say amen. Like, you are just preaching the gospel of privacy to us today. You have such passion, and you can see this is why Innovate Cities has worked in collaboration with private AI and Replica Analytics, and having Anne as our Chief Privacy Officer, so that we can offer the best and strongest governance data sharing platform for everyone to use. It's for anyone and everyone to use. So while data privacy obviously is a hot topic in today's society, Hugh referenced it from this morning's news articles, and we've heard from today's 4 speakers, protecting every citizen's privacy is indeed vitally important. And you can see this through Innovate Cities' vision for the future of innovation and ensuring what we say over and over and over again, that we use data for good, for the greater good. And that is what Innovate Cities is about. So we have a number of questions. I'm going to go through them all. But first, before we really jump in, Hugh, I have a question for you. Why did Innovate Cities decide to take these strong measures to protect personal identifiable information, PII? Let's start there.
the reason, Trina, was this. If we were going to develop a data sharing platform, if we were going to make data available to innovators and others who wanted to use it for good and to develop new products, we needed to make sure that we learned from the experiences of others, but we also needed to make sure that, and most important, that we earned the trust of the communities we work in and work with. And the most important thing to do in earning trust is to make sure that we protect the privacy of individuals, that this is understood as being one of our key features. We're active working with the Simon Community Center, which serves a very disadvantaged population in the northwest corner of the city of Toronto. And one of the things we've learned in working with them is when you are dependent upon others for food and for income and for shelter, one of the things you lose is your dignity. And in the loss of dignity, privacy plays a key role. So for us, if we're going to share data, we have to make sure privacy is protected. And we have to make sure that we earn the trust of the communities that we work within. So that's why we decided to do that.
Thank you, Hugh. And I think I'm going to pose this question to you from one of our viewers. Collection of PI under GDPR is generally based on a legitimate interest versus the Canadian consent model. How do you ensure the data in our data trust in CityShield meets with the higher consent standard? Do you want to speak to that, Anne?
Of course, I insist upon it, and he knows this. I have pushed very hard at times when I didn't think the consent model was being followed strongly enough. And legitimate interest to me it's just weaker, and it takes some interpretation, etc. And I don't want to be critical, but I'm so glad that Innovate Cities is following the consent model, and we work together. You know, if there's a question relating to consent, he calls me, we have a consultation, and we just ensure. See, consent relates, in my view, to transparency. The people who are consenting, are they aware of what they're consenting to? Are the uses of the data transparent so the individual knows exactly what's transpiring? So much of this is transparency and a clear understanding of what consent implies.
Thank you. I hope that answered your question to the viewer that wrote that. Thank you so much. Khaled, I'd like to ask you this question that came in. It says, any concerns about synthetic data being used as training data for another AI model or cascading AI issues into another model? Would you like to address that one?
Sure. I mean, one of the use cases is to create synthetic data to enable the training of AI models. And this synthetic data can solve problems by creating more diverse data sets than the original data, by increasing the size of the data sets to train more stable models. So there are a number of advantages for that. The challenge comes when the original data set is biased, has some bias within it. And now it is possible to use synthetic data generation techniques to debias or reduce the bias in data sets as well. So it is possible to use the same technology to solve the bias problem so that if you are using data to build AI models, you don't maintain or continue that bias, or at least you can reduce it to a certain extent. It's not a panacea in the sense that it's not magic. You have to know what bias exists so that you're able to reduce it and to manage it, but the methods exist to deal with these bias type problems, which I'm assuming what the questioner was alluding to in that comment. So there are ways to address these types of issues with synthetic data as well.
Excellent, thank you. Does anyone else have anything further to add to that question? If not, I'll move on to the next question. We know organizations collect data, and that every customer, every single day, there's customers collecting data, and there's with every single transaction that we make. This question came: what what can organizations do to make their lives easier in this respect, in using the collection of data with certain responsibilities? Maybe Patricia, you can answer that one.
Definitely. So one of the major requirements of many data protection regulations, including the GDPR, is data minimization. And it's about collecting the minimum amount of personally identifiable information that you possibly can to serve the purposes that you absolutely need for your business. And there's also a limitation for how long you can actually keep that data, only for as long as you legitimately need it. What businesses have been used to doing in the past is collecting hordes and hordes of data and keeping it for when they can eventually figure out what to do with it. We are finally getting to the point where companies can actually do something with that data. But because AI is here and 80 to 90% of that data is unstructured, so you'd really need AI in order to unlock value from that data. But now they've got a bunch of data that may or may not be compliant with data protection regulations, depending on what's actually in there. Now they've got a bunch of data that's just a mess, so they don't really know what to do with it to unlock the value in the first place, so they're really struggling with that. What they need to do first is comb through that data, make sure that what kind of personally identifiable information is actually in that data to assess the risks, determine who has access to those different types of personally identifiable information. How can they even answer access to information requests or requests to be forgotten when they don't know what's in that data in the first place? And so with this general assessment that they have to do with the unstructured data that they have, and oftentimes with the mishmash of different types of structured databases that they have across the organization, they need to create this data map of what is contained. And with that data map, they need to then determine what data do they actually need, what data can they get rid of, how can they minimize the personally identifiable information within those data sets, and going forward, how can they minimize the amount of personally identifiable information collected at the very beginning of the process. So as soon as that data is about to be collected, assess, do we need this? What's the best way to remove it? If you think about various tasks that you could use AI for, like topic modeling, sentiment analysis, a lot of them don't require the personally identifiable information in order to train those models. You could still tell how well a customer service call went. You could still tell what kind of products were mentioned. You could still train a chatbot without the personally identifiable information because you're trying to get the dialogue flow. You're not trying to get somebody's phone number or somebody's name or the exact date that they purchased a product, for example. So really, it's about looking at the kind of data that they're collecting in a holistic perspective, and also allowing their data protection people to understand what is going on the tech side very fundamentally. So that they can build privacy in from a foundational aspect like Anne really promotes.
Trina?
Yes.
If I might, I just want to add 2 or 3 points to Patricia's points. First and foremost, I think organizations need to understand the context they're operating in as they collect this information. And in particular, they need to understand the obligations that they are subject to in the event that they start collecting this information. Because as Patricia was pointing out, and as Anne's remarks demonstrate, is that once you start collecting this information, you are all of a sudden imposing obligations on yourself, both legally and also from a publicity point of view. You must also make sure that you have protections in place. And before you start using the information, you have to go back and see, did you actually get consent to do this? And then lastly, and maybe this is a little bit of an advertisement for both Patricia and Khaled, but I think you, and I guess potentially us, you need to go and speak to people who have the technological and governance expertise. And I know people will say, because we all feel this about red tape and why do I have to do this? Well, let me just make the point from today. If the folks from Home Depot could go back in time, and if they had thought about these issues before they decided to, use Meta's really cool software to determine, how many snow shovels I'm buying and that kind of stuff, they likely would have done this in a heartbeat. let alone the potential for other liabilities. So I think it's really important not to see, and Anne and Khaled and Patricia have been very helpful to us as an organization around this. Privacy isn't an add-on. It isn't something extra. It's fundamental. And if you start viewing it this way and start understanding, it's just with data comes obligations, and so there we are. Anyway, Trina, I just thought I would add that.
No, thank you so much, Hugh. And I really love those points that you added. In fact, it really also speaks to our mission of using data for good as well. So actually, can you just build on that a little bit? I know you mentioned the Simon Wollner, but it'd be helpful to hear maybe some other examples of this concept of using data for good. And maybe Hugh, you can kick it off, and then anybody else on the panel that would like to weigh in with on this question.
There are a bunch of examples. Simon Wollner is one example. We're working with them and our partner at Seneca College. We're going to start off by building a data. Well, when I say we, I mean Seneca and the interns. They're going to build a database so that Simon Wollner can better understand the data they're collecting around the issue of food insecurity. Then we're going to make it available into our data trust, and we are in the process of developing a model that's repeatable. This will then be adopted by other organizations. It's based on open source software and the rest of it. It won't have any PII in it. All of a sudden, you have organizations better understanding their communities. You have policymakers having access to data, and we can start to better fulfill the needs and meet the needs of people who are food insecure. But there are endless examples, but that's just one clear one. Another one is we want to start a project with an organization out in Regina called Namarand, where we will start to do things around this in terms of homelessness. And we also want to help to work with others in developing databases that better understand the needs of First Nations peoples who are homeless, because that is a very complicated set of needs. Like, for example, someone who's gone through a residential school, they walk into a homeless shelter and they see the bunk beds, traumatic, triggering experience. So these are all the kinds of things that are available, that are out there. Our technology gives data providers control. It allows people to call the data up onto the platform. And we don't have to worry about whether the products get along with each other. So anyway, sorry, I'm not trying to take up the time of my fellow panelists here.
Anything to add? Khaled, Patricia, Anne, anything to add to this question on using data for good? If not, I will move on to the next question. Oh, sorry, Khaled, did you want to jump in? Sorry.
Oh, just some additional examples. A lot of the products we get involved in have to do with health research and providing non-identifiable data sets to support health research. So some of recent projects are in oncology, for example, where data is being made available to researchers to conduct additional analyses or secondary analyses from data that's already been collected. And also studies on mental health, and to be able to reanalyze existing data to learn more about potential treatments, potential causes of negative outcomes. So making health data more readily available for this type of secondary analysis can accelerate the path to better treatments, reducing toxicities for patients who are taking existing treatments. The benefits can be life-changing, even life-saving for patients.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In the area of health, there's so much need for strong health data for research purposes, but it is essential that the data are totally scrubbed in terms of personal identifier, because having your personal identity linked with your medical information that's being widely used can just be a nightmare. So I totally agree with Khaled, and the way Khaled is doing it with the synthetic data really strengthens the protection of the data.
Thank you. We are running short on time, and there are a number of questions. I'm going to try and ask maybe one or two more. Obviously, this is a topic of interest to our viewers. Well, I kind of know the answer to this, but I'm going to let Hugh answer. Do you allow not-for-profits to submit data to your trusts?
Yes, we don't curate the data. We're agnostic. We want everybody who is interested to become part of our data trust.
Absolutely. A question that says, are data redaction tech, private AI, and synthetic data replica tech, are you competing with each other or complementing each other? Patricia?
Yeah, I can take that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Very complementary. So you could use them for different use cases. For example, as Khaled was mentioning, synthetic data is often used for medical research on structured data, for instance. And when it comes to the kind of tech that we're creating, it's really about unlocking the unstructured data or verifying the risk on data sets that are structured, for example. So if you want to make sure that there is no PII that you're missing when you're training a synthetic data algorithm, for example, we could be used there as a layer to just scan and alert if anything was surprising. But in large part, when you're using Replica analytics technology, it's super powerful because it will maintain the statistical distribution of the data without you being able to see the original data, making you be able to share it much more freely, allowing you to keep a lot of the value that when you are anonymizing structured data, you might not be able to have in store otherwise. That might be things like, and Khaled, you're probably going to be way better at explaining this than I am, but for example, if you want to keep age information in structured data, normally you use an age range in the medical field, but if you have a synthetic age, that might get you a little bit closer to what the patient was actually like. When it comes to the kind of data that we deal with, it's really about what is going on around the personally identifiable information that is valuable. So there's a lot of value from determining how a conversation went. There's a lot of value in removing the personally identifiable information, but keeping information about particular disease, for example. And you really need to use AI in order to do that when it comes to unstructured data, because of how messy and unpredictable that data is. And we can, for example, in a very complementary way, be used for de-identifying or redacting electronic medical records in combination with Khaled's technology, which would take the structured data sets of a medical, healthcare organization and then synthesize them for other purposes.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And again, I hope we've answered the viewer's question there. We are really close to, unfortunately, running out of time now. But Hugh, I just want to ask you very quickly in like kind of 30 seconds, 45 seconds, I'll give you there. If you can just tell our viewers, how are people reacting to Innovate Cities' commitment to privacy?
People react really well to it. And it's table stakes, and that's really positive, and that's a testament to the work that Anne has done. But the other thing that I think really resonates with people is this is a Canadian thing. Look around this. If we were at a table, look around this room. It's Canadian innovation. It's Canadian thought leadership, and we can play a really fundamental role in building a Canadian modeled innovation economy that combines our leadership in governance, our leadership in technology, and our leadership in the respect for these kind of human rights. And I think that is really a message that shouldn't be missed.
Hugh, I think that is a great way to end today's session. I want to thank you all for speaking with us today and joining us. For all of our viewers who attended, thank you for joining us for this very important conversation. There are some questions I wasn't able to ask because of time, but I do encourage our viewers to send us an email to info@innovatecities.com. You can also make sure to follow all of our speakers on their social channels, follow Innovate Cities on social channels, follow Anne for your morning Twitter report on her Twitter account. And I think we need to do another one of these, Hugh, and keep this important conversation going. Thank you all for being here. If you are interested in becoming a consumer or data provider, we want to hear from you. So please reach out to us at hello@cityshield.ca, or you can go to our website and you can contact myself or Hugh. We really want to be in touch. Thank you all so very much. Happy Privacy Day tomorrow. Yeah. And you'll be celebrating.
You bet. You bet. Lovely seeing you.
Excellent. Have a great day, everyone. And until next time, from Innovate Cities. Bye for now.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.